Imagine a powerful leader stepping proudly before his generals, announcing that a new weapon, which he claims can traverse continents, pierce any defense, and render entire missile shields obsolete, has passed its final test. Yet just as that display of strength unfolds, the war it was meant to reinforce cracks further, exposing vulnerabilities rather than certifying dominance. That is the scene today, as Vladimir Putin unveils what he says is an unstoppable nuclear-powered cruise missile and announces Russia's air defenses are impenetrable,
the goal of this
while real-world events suggest the opposite. In recent days, Russia has announced a successful test of its new nuclear-powered cruise missile, the 9M730 Burevestnik, NATO designation SSC-X-9. Skyfall. According to Russian military officials, the missile flew some 14,000 kilometers, approximately 8,700 miles, and remained airborne for about 15 hours during a trial on October 21, 2025. President Putin, clad in camouflage, described the weapon as a unique weapon that nobody else in the world has. The Kremlin, via spokesman Dmitry Peskov, framed the test as a reflection of Russia's need to ensure its own security amid growing Western militaristic sentiment. Meanwhile, from Washington, Donald Trump criticized the display, stating the test was not appropriate, and that Putin should focus on ending the war in Ukraine rather than showcasing new weapons.
Итоговую декларацию БРИКС, и там говорится о необходимости глобальной и региональной.
I read the final declaration of the BRICS summit. It talks about the need for global and regional stability and security and a fair world. And the motto of Russia's BRICS presidency includes these ideas of fairness and security. But what does that have in common with your actions over the last 2.5 years, with the Russian invasion of Ukraine? Where are fairness, stability, and security here? Including Russia's security, because before the start of the special military operation, there were no drone attacks on Russian territory, no shelling of Russian towns, no foreign troops occupying Russian territory. There was none of this.
Российских городов, ни иностранных войск, оккупирующих российскую территорию, этого не было.
Начну с безопасности России, потому что для меня это самое главное. Вы сказали про удары дрон.
Let me start with Russia's security, because for me, that's the priority. You mentioned drone attacks and so on. Yes, this didn't happen before. But the situation was far worse. The situation was like this.
Предложение наладить контакты и отношения.
In response to our constant, persistent proposals to develop contacts and relations with countries of the Western world, they always tried to put us in our place. I can tell you that for sure. On the surface, it was all very friendly. But in fact, they always tried to put us in our place. And from this place, Russia would have ended up being reduced to the status of a second-class state whose sole function is supplier of raw materials, resulting to a large extent in the loss of our country's sovereignty.
At the same time, reports suggest the backdrop of this announcement is less triumphant than portrayed. Because of the Burevestnik's problematic test history and the enormous technical difficulties associated with nuclear-powered cruise missile systems, Western analysts continue to doubt its capabilities. In order to get over Western missile defenses, Putin originally presented the weapon in 2018 as one of 6 next-generation strategic weapons. The announcement's timing also aligns with greater Western military assistance to Ukraine and stricter sanctions against Russia's oil and gas industry. We need to examine a larger context in order to comprehend how this news might be more about strategic signals than a scientific advancement. First, there have been several setbacks throughout the Burevestnik project's lengthy development history. According to publicly compiled databases, the weapon has had at least 13 known tests since 2016, with only 2 partial successes, and none that independent analysts have fully verified as operational. Concerns regarding the maturity of the technology were raised in 2019 when a launch pad accident connected to the program resulted in the deaths of 5 nuclear engineers and a radioactive release. Furthermore, despite Russia's current assertions of a 15-hour flight, no independent sources have officially confirmed any of these claims. Second, there are indications of tension in Russia's overall strategic posture. Analysts point out that Moscow's move comes at a time when pressure is building. Sanctions are severe. Western allies are providing Ukraine with stronger supplies, and Russian forces' morale is clearly declining. Then, the test has 2 functions. On the inside, it strengthens nationalist sentiment. On the outside, it alerts the West to the fact that Russia still has strategic advantages. Third, from the West's perspective, the missile may offer limited practical advantage. As Pavel Podvig, a Russian nuclear forces analyst, observes, it is difficult to see a practical role for such a weapon.
We have also already managed to convey to our American colleagues the information about President Putin's meeting with the General Staff, that happened this morning, and where the president was informed that 5,000 Ukrainian soldiers are surrounded in the area of Kupiansk and 5,500 in the area of Krasnoarmeysk, and about the successful test of the absolutely new class of missile, the Burevestnik, that's nuclear-powered. It's very important that this information is directly reported to the leadership and the key people in the administration of the U.S. president. What remains uncertain and unconfirmed is whether this latest test truly succeeded as claimed, whether the weapon is operationally deployable in meaningful numbers, or whether it represents a paradigm shift in strategic deterrence. According to Russian officials, deployment infrastructure is now ready. However, we must proceed cautiously with this announcement due to the lack of independent verification. Moving on to the conflict in Ukraine, there are indications that Moscow's hold is waning, especially when it comes to air defense and internal security, in contrast to the narrative of Russian superiority suggested by the missile announcement. Concerns about Russia's vulnerabilities closer to home have been raised by reports that Ukrainian drone strikes and air raids within Russia have prompted the temporary closure of several airbases and airports close to Moscow. For instance, according to one briefing, Russia claimed to have shot down 193 Ukrainian drones over Russian territory, including 34 that were headed toward Moscow. While we can't independently confirm every detail, such reports suggest that Russia's air defense network is actively being challenged. Moreover, experts note that the announcement of the Burevestnik test may itself reflect Moscow's insecurity. The test reflects the security concerns that Russia faces, according to Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov, who also emphasized the test's reaction to what Russia perceives as Western militaristic sentiment. Put another way, Russia might be responding to pressure rather than displaying strength. All of this highlights a crucial paradox. A missile hailed as indestructible and unstoppable, unveiled in a show of might, but accompanied by indications that Russia's defenses are being tested. The underlying message may not be "we're invincible," but rather, "we need to appear invincible," given the disparity between the stated capacity and the vulnerabilities on the ground. In summary, the story that is being told today is contradictory. On one hand, President Putin and his military leadership announced a milestone. What they claim is a game-changing weapons system, the Burevestnik nuclear-powered cruise missile, with a 15-hour flight time and intercontinental reach. On the other, the broader context tells a more nuanced story. The missile's real capabilities remain unverified, its practical strategic value questioned, and Russia's wider war effort showing signs of difficulty. The juxtaposition of a show of power with signs of internal weakness invites a reinterpretation. This may be less about a matured military breakthrough and more about strategic posturing under pressure. As Russia steps into the next phase of the war in Ukraine, the world will watch closely, not just the missiles, but the vulnerabilities they purport to disguise.